Hello, everyone. I'm Mitch with Under the Firewall, back with another episode to talk about some more tech stuff. For you guys that don't know me, I am a systems administrator by day and a YouTuber by night. This channel is still relatively new, so I'm trying to put out at least one episode per week just to make a few videos, mostly educational content. It is a little opinionated. I do dabble in a little bit of politics here and there, but I don't let my biases affect the facts of the information. That being said, let's just jump into this week's episode. I want to talk about generative AI models. The pros and cons, and kind of what I see happening and where I see AI going. So, generative AI is, according to Wikipedia, a subset of artificial intelligence that uses generative models to produce text, images, videos, or other forms of data. These models learn underlying patterns and structures of their training data and use them to produce new data based on input. Basically, that is a fancy way of saying that each time you perform a query in a generative AI model, it uses your data that you input to generate content for you. And then when other users go behind you and generate similar queries in the future, it uses all of the data that it learned from you to help the next person in line produce better content. So it's constantly learning. Its models are based on deep neural networks. So it's like almost like an artificial human brain, where the more that it is exposed to information, the more it retains, and the better it can produce similar relevant information the next time it's queried. As of right now, generative AI is still, I would say, in its infancy. Um, the GPT models and everything that you've seen with AI has kind of been popularized in like the last, like, I would say 5 years or so. Um, and over the last 5 years, I mean, we've seen a number of different things happen with AI. I mean, like I said, starting off, that I mean, there are a bunch of pros and there are a bunch of cons, right? And I've personally been privy to some of those pros and cons in my day-to-day job, because I use AI every day almost, working as a systems administrator. I find that personally, it speeds up my work, tenfold whenever I'm using it to accomplish like just very simple tasks. I mean, it can be used to write emails. It can be used to, do coding projects for people like me. It can be used to summarize and digest information a little bit faster. Uh, Trying to think. And basically, yeah, the more it grows, the more powerful of a tool that it becomes, right? Um, every day, generative AI models are learning more and more, and they're being exposed to more information, and more queries are being performed. And you would be surprised at just how integrated AI has become in our daily lives over the last 5 years. I would go so far as to say that AI is probably going to be the next big tech boom, similar to how smartphones were in like the early 2000s. I mean, back then, whenever smartphones were first being popularized and developed, none of us really knew just how impactful smartphones were because, I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, people saw the raw computing power of PCs and servers, and I don't think any of those people knew or expected us to compact that technology in such a small form factor as early as like the 2000s. And then once it happened, it was kind of like almost like a shock to the system because it allowed people from all across the globe to be connected instantaneously in a matter of seconds, right? Whereas previously, you know, you would have to wait days, sometimes months or years to communicate with people that are not like in your immediate vicinity. So it was a huge game changer. Nowadays, it's kind of normalized where that's kind of the expectation, but we sometimes forget that there was a period of time not too very long ago where we did not have access to this technology. And so I think a lot of people nowadays, they take it for granted and they don't understand that what you see now is effectively the equivalent of a very early stage infant when compared to that of like a actual human or animal. If you were to compare AI to a living being, right? And so because we're in such an early stage of artificial intelligence development, there are also some very glaring flaws that we haven't really addressed yet. And I think that we'll get there, right? Because I mean, AI, like everything that can be used as a resource, it's a double-edged sword. Like, yeah, like I can write emails 10 times faster. I can write code, a million times faster. I can, create video and, produce content, at a speed that would, 10 years ago be unheard of. But there are also some very apparent security flaws with AI, right? And privacy issues as well. It's not just security, it is also privacy, right? Because one thing that people don't understand, and I've been talking with a few people at work about this. One guy emailed me about a week ago where he was taking a class about generative AI models, and he was kind of floored because he learned that anything that you basically input into a generative AI model is effectively stored and saved for later to produce queries in the future for similar problems that people query the AI database for. So effectively, what that does is, if for, and I'm not saying that you can't be protected when using an AI model. There are certainly things that you can do to address these privacy and security concerns. However, right now, since it's such an underdeveloped technology as it stands, and we're still in almost like I would say the beta stages of what's currently accessible, these problems aren't properly addressed yet. And so what you're seeing is people are going to take advantage of the flaws that artificial intelligence currently has. And one of those flaws, like I said, is access to personal information. So, to give you an example, let's say I'm creating a coding project for my company, and I say, "All right, generate me a banner with a logo of my company's name and my company's slogan and our um sorry, my cat's in the way. Our company's slogan, and maybe like a few of our company goals in the image, right? So what that AI is going to do is it's going to take my query, it's going to do exactly what I asked it to do, but then it's going to store that information for later. And so now it has access to information about my company. It has my company's name, it has my company's goals, it has my company's, logo, it has my company's, slogan, and whatever else I put into that query. And while it's great in the short term and making my job easier, right now that generative AI model has access to everything that I just input into that query, right? And so if another company comes along and let's say they don't have a good mission statement, let's say they don't have a company goal or a list of, a list of things that they would like to accomplish, or a slogan or things like that. ChatGPT is going to use all of the information that I input into the query beforehand as a direct way of learning from a previous user and then outputting new content to a new user in order to help them proceed with their query or address their problems, basically. Now, that's that's okay, but what that does is that opens up your company, yourself. It opens yourself up to being exposed to things that you would otherwise not have been exposed to. If I were to have generated that content on my own, I would have had more of a competitive advantage, for an example, right? If I were to not use ChatGPT or any of the other generative AI models, I would be able to keep that information private. That would effectively slow down the learning curve of the generative AI model, and I would have a competitive advantage, right? And then it's not only just the learning capacity of artificial intelligence that poses a threat to its users. There's also the way that generative AI models store the data, right? So a lot of people don't really understand the technicalities and the logistics of actually storing generative AI data. But one thing that I've seen companies do is, and this was a big issue whenever Copilot was introduced by Microsoft. I remember reading some articles about this. Sometimes, in order to save money on data storage because storing data in data servers is exceptionally expensive, right? In order to save money, what some of the AI models do is store data locally. Like if you're using Copilot on your local machine, whenever Copilot was first introduced, it was saving all of your personal queries and the data that it generated on your local machine. And instead of uploading and saving that information to a data center, it would save it locally and effectively create a connection to the greater neural network to be able to query that data for like future use, right? And that does two things, right? And I'm not completely sure about this. Like, if I am wrong, feel free to correct me. But one, that opens yourself up to the interception of that data, and two, that creates an open connection between yourself and the AI model in question, right? And so there's going to be constant pass through back and forth of data being transmitted. And whenever that's happening, you know, if it's not being intercepted, that's great. But let's say you're a Fortune 500 company and there is, dozens of open connections between you and the GPT model. Let's say one of your programmers gets their connection sniffed and intercepted by a malicious actor, right? That one programmer could be a huge security hole for the entire company because anything that they're going to input, any query that they're going to generate is effectively a security risk. And so personal data being consumed by AI models is vulnerable to interception, and it's vulnerable to being used by malicious third-party actors. Now, that's not the only concern that people have either. And so that's why this episode is called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, right? Because, like I said earlier, AI is a double-edged sword. It can be used as an amazing tool and resource to be able to aid in everyday life, or it can be used maliciously to kind of take advantage of security threats or security flaws, rather, in the model to, I guess, learn more about a potential target for attack. And I think one of the things that scares me about AI is the potential for misuse. Because AI can do some truly terrifying things. Just off the top of my head, one of the big things that you're going to start seeing is generative AI used as a way to generate fake news content. You can generate fake news articles. You can spread misinformation. And not only that, but you can actually use AI models to generate fake images, generate, fake voice. If you input it into the learning module. And so there have been people already, like it's 2025. We're still in the infancy of AI. There's people already misusing AI to, like, do fake hostage phone calls, like, impersonating family members, or trying to blackmail people with fake images of themselves, right? Shit like that. I mean, it's absolutely like insane stuff, and that's not the AI's fault. That is a that is a danger of being exposed to the human condition, man. Like, I mean, there are some people that unfortunately just aren't held to the same standards and morals and ethics as others. And not only they're not held there, they just have no respect for the morals and ethics of others. I think some people live life as, almost like a way to experiment with, like, game theory, right? And it's those people that are particularly dangerous. I was reading an article about the pros and cons of AI, and a few of the things that they were discussing, especially like at the George Mason University, some of the key takeaways are: generative AI tools reduce the money and time needed for content creation, boosting productivity and profitability. However, it could also lead to copyright infringement and increased data security risk. JP Morgan research estimates generative AI could increase global GDP by $7 to $10 trillion, or as much as 10%. And the technology could result in a massive workforce productivity boom over the next 1 to 3 years, which could affect the shape of the economic cycle in the future. And those are good things. However, we do run the risk of those AI models running rampant or doing things that the general public wouldn't necessarily approve of. And one thing that concerns me that I want to talk about is Google actually does a lot of development with AI itself, and they have recently rescinded their ban ending using AI as weapons. I can't say I didn't see this coming. I think that ever since Google was kind of taken over by the parent company Alphabet, things in the company have just been shifting to less ethics, more business focused. And so I can't say this doesn't surprise me. Or I can't say this does surprise me, rather. Uh, that being said, it's only a matter of time before we see AI dropping fucking drones on people's heads in war zones. And the problem with that is, you think humans have a potential for error when it comes to war, and of course there are going to be things like friendly fire and misuse of weapons and stuff like that. But AI is going to be susceptible tenfold, right? Because AI is a learning module by nature. And so in order for AI to learn, it almost has to make mistakes, right? So one thing that scares me is that there are going to have to be innocent lives sacrificed in order for AI to get better. And my question is where do we draw that line? Where is the line in the sand that says, you know, this is where we let AI take human life? Because that is a question that we are slowly getting to the line of and having to ask ourselves, right? It's going to be terrifying whenever we first see it happen. But mark my words, it is coming. I don't think that people will. I don't think people will understand until it's more humanized, right? Like the best example that I can think of is the movie I, Robot, where you see one of the robots basically breaking the safety module. And one of the things in iRobot is there's a rule that robots can't harm humans, and basically there's a specific robot in iRobot that does not adhere to those rules that was developed by a scientist to not be beholden by those restrictions, and as a result of that, other robots in the model are exposed to that, and they learn from that one robot's lack of restrictions, and basically the robots start to attack humans based on what they deem as threatening, right? And so I think that effectively what's going to happen is in the beginning stages of using AI for war, we're not going to see, or we're not really going to understand the true impacts of what's happening until it's digestible in a form that the general population can understand. Until we see humanized robots physically like hurting people, I don't think it's going to click psychologically. But once that happens, I think there's going to be almost a panic. I hope that doesn't happen, and I hope that cooler heads prevail when it does. But that is one potential future, that is one potential outcome that could definitely occur. Now, I'm a firm believer that AI can definitely lead to a brighter future for humanity. I prefer to remain optimistic. I mean, I was reading articles, and it mentions some of the stuff that AI is being used for right now. And some of the hottest applications, for example, are autonomous vehicles, facial recognition software, virtual assistants. I mean, things like that, right? Like things that are generally very helpful to our everyday life. I mean, not only that, there are education-based research articles that state that AI is being used every day in school. I mean, students are using it to write essays. I know that college professors aren't too hot about that. But it helps with learning. It helps with information processing. It helps with writing. I mean, there are a million different applications for this technology, right? The problem with it, I think, is just like any other technology that can be used as a weapon, it is solely at the hands of humanity how we choose to wield it. And if we choose to, build and be constructive and do positive things with it, then, AI is going to be used as a positive tool. But if we choose to use AI as a weapon, if we choose to use AI to be destructive, it can be just as equally destructive as it can be constructive. It can truly be a weapon of mass destruction if we choose to apply it as such. That being said, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on generative AI models. That's just me expressing some of my opinions. I thought that this particular topic was very interesting. I just wanted to share some of my thoughts and get this information out there, start a dialogue. But let me know what you think. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more. I'll be covering topics like this every week. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye.